Hello, I'm Charles Tubbs, Director of Dane County Emergency Management. This next section of education and training should be some of the most beneficial information you will receive in dealing with America's crisis, the active shooter assailant. Unfortunately, we have to teach and learn about this deadly situation and talk with our children and loved ones. Prepare our schools, churches, homes, business, and yes, even our own lives. These experts, Jocelyn and Cindy, speaking to you today, will deliver a message that should be an everlasting impact on your life and everything you do to live a safe and healthy lifestyle. This is not a scare tactic. This is very, very real. A possibility of a life encounter. My message to you today, be vigilant, smart, and know your limitations. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back. We will now be covering Module 2 of How to Survive an Active Assailant. During this module, we will be covering during the event. My name is Jocelyn Longley and I'm a Deputy Sheriff for the Dane County Sheriff's Office, and I also run the Emergency Preparedness Program.
And I am Cindy Holmes. I'm a retired deputy with the Sheriff's Office, and I'm currently the Emergency Preparedness Assistant Coordinator for the Sheriff's Office. Again, we want to just start out with, this is all about empowerment. This is all about giving you in the community, our residents of Dane County, the information that's crucial in order to survive these events, which are life skills. It isn't just applicable in one setting.
One of the first things we want to talk about during the event, during an active assailant event, once that gunfire is heard, once you hear people running and screaming, once you know this is going on, how in the building you work in, or if you're working out in the community, the area you're in, how can you warn other people as to what's happening? And you need to do this safely. By notifying people of this situation, you can help them come up with a plan. Are they going to run? Are they going to hide? Or are they going to fight? So do you have a walkie-talkie system? Do you have a PA system in your building? If so, do you know how to use it? Or are only certain people allowed to make the PA announcements? We've found across the community that there's a lot of phone paging systems that they have in buildings. It's just that people don't know how to use them. It could be you running down that hall yelling, there is a man or a lady with a gun in the lobby. That may be how you alert others. And the alert could be actually the sound of gunfire. So there's a lot of different ways, but I want you to take this time and think, in my workplace, what do we have for options? I know there's an email option, there's a text option, but how can you notify as many people as possible? And here are just some other things to consider. I talked about, can you access it? Do you know how to use it? Do you all test to see if it works? We have done drills in numerous schools, businesses, where they have done drills and realized that their alert systems did not work. They did not hear certain pages or announcements in certain areas. It's really important that you test this and that you give that feedback so you know it works. Can you hear it outside? Are there certain areas such as break rooms or bathrooms? And can you give real-time information? Also, those of you that work in buildings where there's other tenants, other businesses, do you have a way set up that you can communicate with them, and can you do it quickly if there's an emergency? If you're located up on the 6th floor and there's another business down on the 2nd floor and something's occurring, you all need to be able to communicate within that building. Another important thing to think about during that bang, when this incident's happening, and actually I would say it's good to mental script this prior so you know how, is if your building suddenly needs to go into a lockdown, or some call it a lockout, how quickly can that happen? Who can do it, and how do you do it? It may be you're sitting at your desk and you suddenly see a very large presence of law enforcement outside. They have their rifles, they're dealing with an incident. If your building isn't secure at all times, you need to get that locked down until you know more of what's going on. Another thing to keep in mind is if law enforcement is dealing with something near your building, we don't have time to call you or to run in and tell you. Our 911 center, our emergency management will work on getting that out, but it's crucial if you're seeing this, we're empowering you to make that decision and lock that building down until you know more so that you're safe. So I mentioned how are people warned. At the Sikh Temple shooting down in Oak Creek, there was a horrible incident there with an active assailant attack. On that day, these two kids you see on your screen, 9 and 11 years old, they were out near the parking lot waiting for their parents who had gone to the grocery store. These kids watched that assailant pull in the parking lot, and he shot and killed someone right in front of them. What did these kids do? They warned others. They ran back inside that building yelling, because kids are good at that, man with a gun in the parking lot. What was happening and where? And they truly believe people survived this event because they had that information.
It's important to get good information, correct information, to get it out quickly to as many people as possible. But what should it sound like? December 14, 2012, that was the day the incident occurred at Sandy Hook. And on that day, in that school, because it was around the holidays, people were in the building that aren't normally there, have no idea how day-to-day operations work, what they sound like, what they look like. So they're in helping the kids with holiday festivities. And in that time period, which was pretty normal across our nation, people typically use code words or code phrases. So for Sandy Hook, code black. So think to yourself, if you're sitting in your office, you may even be watching module number 2 of this training, and you hear somebody running down the hallway yelling, code black. What does that mean to you? Do you have any idea what it means? Because if you're not intimately familiar with what the meaning behind those words are, then it means nothing. And if it means nothing, how are you supposed to respond? Even law enforcement and other first responders in this day and age have moved further toward using plain language instead of a lot of the 10 codes that we have. So just say what it is. People are afraid that they're going to alert the perpetrator that that individual's in the building and they're trying to kill people. That person already knows what they're doing. I care about what you know. If something happens in the room that you're at right now, that response that you have is going to look different than somebody on a different floor or a different part of the building. So that information is crucial to decide how you're going to respond. Notifying 911. I hate to chuckle, but I think about this, and we really shouldn't have to tell people notify 911. But what happens, and it's part of human nature, people respond in different ways to critical incidents. And sometimes what happens, instead of calling 911, their first contact is live streaming what's happening from inside, or they're contacting some news media outlet and they're giving a live interview on the phone. Neither of those examples are going to get you help, and that is so important in order to make sure that people receive the medical attention and the support that they need. So that first call should be to 911. If you want to call friends or text family afterwards, so be it. Also make sure that you are safe before you do that. Your safety in your life is more important, but once you are in a safe place, call 911.
The 911 center wanted us to pass on, when you call 911, immediately say where you are and then say what is occurring. That way, by at least getting the where you are out, if there's a disconnect, they have that information. Landlines generate an address, but to know, again, specifically where in the building you are. And Cindy will talk a little bit more about cell phones a little later. But as you can see here, these are the key things that 911 needs to know: number of assailants, any descriptors you could give, and definitely the location. So my question for you is, at your workplace, if you have landlines, whatever type of phone you use at your office, how do you call 911? Is it star 911, 8911, 89911? I'm asking you and I want you to know, because when an emergency is happening, that is not the time to go through a binder and figure out how to make a 911 call. Also keep in mind, you have cell phone service in that building and no other methods that you can use to call 911. For example, in Dane County, you can text 911. You type 911, and then in your message, again, where are you, what is happening, get your message in there. They will text you back. Our 911 center will not call you back because obviously you are texting because it is not safe for you to make that voice call. Just on a side note, those of you with smartphones, smartwatches, they have emergency SOS settings, so be aware of that and know how to use it.
Just a little bit about how the 911 center works. I think people have this myth that they believe that there's 1,000 working lines that come into a communications center. And maybe that happens in places like LA or New York, but where we are right now, the number of actual 911 emergency lines coming into the communications center are pretty few. And so you may very well receive a pre-recorded message, or you might hear something that sounds like a really rapid, busy signal. We don't want you hanging up. If you are one of those that receives one or the other, we are asked to tell you to please stay on the line. If you hang up, that generates a whole different kind of call, and it really kind of confuses what is happening and just sort of muddies everything up. So if you're calling, just understand if you get either a recorded message or a busy signal, please stay on the line if at all possible. Please, familiarize yourself, whatever community you live in. If you have a local police department that is the first responder for your area, get to know what their non-emergency numbers are. And also, does 911 call into that police department or does it go downtown? So do a little bit of research and find that out. I'm going to kind of circle back to what we talked about in Module 1, and that is knowing where you are all the time. There is nothing more frustrating than to receive an emergency call. Maybe it's for a vehicle crash on the interstate, and we have people that maybe have been driving for a while and they simply haven't been paying attention to where they are. And when we ask for the location, they don't really know. And that's frustrating because then we kind of have to do a good job at hunting and pecking for these individuals. Know where you are, know physical addresses. What happened in Middleton, 1850 Deming Way, that is the main address for that entire building. But WTS Paradigm was just housed in Suite 120. Really need to know that. Multiple floors, multiple levels in buildings. Know what floor you're on. If you're on the 10th floor and have an emergency call and you don't provide that information or don't know it or can't remember it, then as we enter that space, we have to search very slowly and methodically and tactically because we don't want to miss any potential perpetrators or people otherwise that might be in that location. So if we can expedite to the 10th floor, then that's going to make our ability to bring an end to this situation much more doable. I just want to say, when we find good examples of things that we're talking about, we like to share it with folks because it kind of gives them something to look at and something to hear to help formulate what their dialogue might be. So when you call 911, you may have done that in the past, but it is often not as easy as you think. When we are in a critical incident, our bodies have a stress response. And with that stress response, one of the things that occurs is that all your vital organs speed up, and therefore we run out of oxygen very quickly. So I want to play this as a very short audio of a female at Paradigm on that day in the parking lot calling to report what was happening. So I want you to pay attention to the first three things that she says, and then I'll just briefly wrap that up for you when it's over.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
We have an active shooter situation at 1850 Deming Way, Suite 120.
I'm getting help on the way right now.
Sir, are you there?
Yep, yeah, tell me exactly what happened.
I'm not sure. We heard gunshots. I heard reports that someone was shooting. I have an active shooter in my office building.
Okay. Do you have a description of the suspect?
Let me confirm who they said it was. One moment.
One question that often comes up with our trainings is what am I seeing in the end of the footage during this? Understand, law enforcement, we will have our rifles drawn. We will be coming in. We are not waiting for SWAT. We know Columbine took too long. Law enforcement first on scene, they are coming in to stop the threat. So as Cindy said, follow directions, show your hands. If you have information, yell it out and give it to them. And this is a perspective. This is just 5 people that you see on the screen running at them. Now imagine an entire office building running out. All right, on this screen you see 3 civilian active assailant responses. Alice, avoid, deny, defend, and run, hide, fight. All of these plans are supported by our chiefs of police, our previous sheriff, and our current sheriff. We will be using the Department of Homeland Security run, hide, fight verbiage today. I can tell you to date we've trained close to 24,000 people here in Dane County, and we find that most people are familiar with the run, hide, fight. Similar to stop, drop, and roll, it's easy to remember.
Again, you're going to see some repeat on some images. It's because that we feel like it's important enough to say it again. So what is it that you have in your toolbox? What have you done to prepare? Have you done mental scripting? Have you thought through what you would do in the event that something like this happens? We know that preparation and training and building that muscle memory and getting those reps in are so important for preparation. So remember, just as we said before, we don't rise to our level of expectations, we fall to the level of our training.
Also reference Homeland Security, FBI, Run, Hide, Fight websites. There's great videos, there's great additional handouts. But for starters, we are going to go into the Run, Hide, Fight, and we'll briefly start with some of the run video from the Department of Homeland Security.
First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority.
Stop that guy! Stop that guy! Hey!
Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911.
Yes, we're to Washington. Help us!
So the first thing that we're going to always recommend to people, regardless of what you call your plan, how you put it together, we're going to recommend trying to get out, running, escaping, evacuating. If you are not present in that space while that person is committing that act, then your chances of being injured and or killed are pretty slim to none. I don't care, again, what you call your plan. I don't necessarily care even what it looks like, but the important things to remember is that you have options for yourself and that you are flexible. So when we talk about running, consider where your exits are, where are your doors to your stairwells or places like that that you can get out eventually from that building. In order to know those things, you have to have an idea of what your escape routes are. So think to yourself, are you the kind of person that drives the same way back and forth between work and home? Are you the person that comes in and leaves by the same door as you come and go? Because you have to think about what you default to in a moment of crisis. In a moment of crisis, we default to what we know, which again is so important why we need that training. So if you are pretty dependable or predictable in the way you come and go. Mix it up a little bit. Find different doors, find different routes. So on the day that this significant incident occurs, you have more than one option open to yourself. Because I may say, well, I have planned on in my mental scripting just going out this door, wherever that door is. But on that day, it's not available. What happens with humans, it's human nature. If we don't know what to do, oftentimes we freeze up. When we say run, that's exactly what we mean, but we don't always want you running in a straight line. If I am looking to do harm to you and you take off running from me and you are running in a straight line, that is really easy to predict. So that makes you an easier target. So change up those movements. You're running back and forth, you're running low, you're running high, you're doing different things like that that make you unpredictable. Don't run from your building or from your structure or wherever you are and try to get into your car and drive away. Probably one of the most consistent things that you will see from these events, especially the larger scale ones, is that there are hundreds of vehicles on scene. Some of those first responders, some of those people that are trying to get there to get their loved ones, some people just want to stop and look and see what's happening. But regardless, it creates congestion. This is a picture from Sandy Hook, and if you notice those two individuals with that stretcher. They had to walk that stretcher from a distance to get to the building because there were so many vehicles, the ambulance could not get up there. The other thing to remember is that I talked about explosive devices, and those things have been found planted near vehicles in order to set off a secondary incident. So we don't want that happening either. If you can't get to a door, if that is not something available to you, however, you have a window. Windows make great exits. So then think to yourself, you look at a pane of glass. On that pane of glass, what is the weakest part? In other words, you want to direct your energy towards the area on that pane of glass that's going to be easiest to break. So that location are in the corners. So look for a corner, we call it break and rake. Rake out as much of that glass as you can so you minimize injury on the way out. You can lay down a piece of clothing or something to go through that sill. If you are higher up, consider lowering yourself down as far as you can before letting go. Decrease the distance to the ground, that way hopefully minimizing injuries. Virginia Tech, on that day in one of those classrooms, all but 2 individuals went out windows to get out of that building. So they were on the 2nd floor, they were 19 feet 2 inches off the ground. Were there injuries? Absolutely, you can probably bet on that. But all of those individuals that went out those windows survived. Now we're going to move from, well, maybe we can't run because it's not safe. So we're going to talk about the hide portion of this. We have a little short video again from Department of Homeland Security on that.
If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm.
You're sitting in your office, or you're sitting in a break room, or you're in a meeting, and you start to hear what you think is gunfire, but it sounds very close to where you are. We don't want people running towards the firefight. That's not safe for the general person out in the community. You might have to consider at that point, is there a safer place that I can get to than where I am at right now that possibly you can get behind a closed door? Mental script those things from different locations in your setting. If you're here, where would be the logical choice and the safest choice for me? Once you get into that space, look at that door. Look to see, does it have a lock? And do you have what you need to lock it? That's your first layer of protection. What the FBI tells us is that if you can buy yourself 3 minutes in an active assailant incident, your chances of surviving go way up. So what you're doing at that moment is buying yourself time. You are delaying access for that perpetrator to be able to get to you. Think of yourself, as an onion. So you're that dense part of that onion, and you have to peel layers away to get to you. So once you get that door closed, look at the lock. If you have a lock, engage the lock, but don't stop there. If you don't have a lock, either way, we want you adding layers. So then once you've done that, look around the space that you're in. Do you have something in that area that you can use to barricade? If you can barricade and put layers behind that door, that's going to delay or deny access to the individual. Once you do that and you are in the room, other considerations. One is, now is there a secondary way out? Is there another door, another window that you can get through or out? If you can't, you might be in that space for the duration of the event. So then we want you spread out. We don't want people lumped together in one mass in the corner of a room. We want you low to the ground in order to minimize the risk of being shot through a wall or a door. And then turn the lights off. Silence your cell phones. Do everything you can to be quiet. And then your next step should be, if that person gets through my barricade and gets into this room, what can I arm myself with? What can I be ready for to move towards that fight?
It is suggested, once you lock that door, barricade it, and you are safe in that room, do not open that door until law enforcement comes to that door. Law enforcement will need to clear that building. We will then escort people out, and we will direct them out once we know the building is safe. People often ask, how do I know it's law enforcement at the door? How can I confirm? Previous incidents, survivors could hear the law enforcement radio out there. A law enforcement officer, deputy slid a badge under a door. Or if you truly are concerned, you can call 911 or non-emergency, and they can determine through our radio numbers if we're at your door. And I just want you to understand, you could be in that room for a long period of time. As we mentioned several times, we have to clear that entire building. So you may have to utilize a garbage can as a restroom. What kind of food may be in there if you're in there for a long period of time? If you have injured people in there with you, what kind of things could you do to help them?
We talk about hiding, and what hiding encompasses is not only physically hiding, but also being out of way of visual access. So if you have glass or windows or things like that that would expose you, looking, doing that mental scripting, thinking about what could I have available to me to cover that glass. If you don't have anything, be prepared to hide in locations where even if I look in, I'm not going to be able to see you. So along that same wall as the door, or behind a piece of furniture or something like that, so that you're not easily seen. These are some examples from trainings, and I love the top left one because, as you can see, there is tons of furniture in front of that doorway. This is an elementary school. It's in an elementary classroom, and these kids were doing barricading drills. So it doesn't have to look pretty. We don't care about the aesthetics of it. It just has to work. And if you notice, if you look at that door closely, that is an outward opening door. A lot of people feel like, well, it's outward opening, I cannot barricade. That is absolutely untrue. You can do it. Other considerations, though, to think about if that's the case. How can you secure that door, while people are barricading? And if you notice, again, if you look at that door space, there's actually a table that looks like it's tipped up on the end. Now, when you see things like this, you have to understand every piece of security footage that we have looked at from live events. If a perpetrator is moving down a hallway, for example, checks a door or doorknob or door handle, and they cannot easily get in, every single time they moved on. Other examples of what we have done out there. So you see these individuals on the left side, one at the top left corner simply took a power cord or a computer cord, which is in most spaces in places that you work when you walk into a room, simply tied that around those doorknobs and used her weight and leverage to hold that door while other people then are barricading. We will demonstrate some of these things for you, but you see this gentleman here, he has a chair and he's simply putting it over that handle. That is something that absolutely can work. If you have just one of those door jams or I can't even remember what you call those. Door wedge. That was a hard word. You know, if you have something like that, those can be utilized. You need to make sure that that wedge that you may have, though, does not slide across that surface because sometimes that can happen. You can look at the top right in these two ladies. This is from a daycare. This is a great space for the 4-year-olds that they're in charge of during the day because the walls are made out of concrete block. Because of that, rounds from a firearm not likely to penetrate that. But they were struggling because there was no way to secure the door. So we challenged them, put them in the room and said, see what you come up with. And they came up with just simply using their bodies, feet to back, and that door did not budge. So if all you have is your body, it is certainly something that you can do. This is me pouting in the bathroom, but actually it's just me demonstrating. A lot of times bathrooms, if it's a single stall, you will have a lock on that main door, but sometimes that's not an option because there's multiple stalls. So if you have something like this where you've got the door and you've got a wall or a half wall directly across, again, you can just lay on the floor or use your body to secure it.
Yeah, and you can actually see in this video, there is a lock on this door. But it was just a great space to show her being able to keep that door shut. I could not open it at all.
Other considerations, I call these crash bars. A lot of these types of doors you see in houses of worship or in movie theaters or places like that. And it does take a little bit of creative thinking, but these are all things that were done during the course of our training. So this individual figured out there was a space between the movable parts on that crash bar. Simply took a cord, tied it around that, tied it around a desk, door was inoperable. Double doors, crash bars. They simply took a power cord and tied those two pieces of metal together so that those doors did not operate. The bottom was a training we did at a business, and they simply filled the gap in that space between the door and the refrigerator with the furniture that was in the room. Door solid, not moving, turn the lights off, low to the ground, on the floor, spread out. You could be in there for a long time.
So this is a picture that I took in one of the schools where we were doing a barricade drill. The kids lined up the tables from door to wall. It was an inward opening door. They did it in about 26 seconds. That door did not budge at all. They simply wedged the tables again between the door and the wall.
If you don't have locks on doors in a particular area, and you're thinking that it might be a good idea, ask the question why. Why can we not have a lock on this door? Sometimes there are very legitimate reasons why. But unless you ask, you don't know. And if there is no reason, then consider adding a lock. If you consider adding a lock, I want you to pay attention to the type of lock that you're thinking about installing. One of the takeaways from Sandy Hook was that on that day, in order to secure those classroom doors, a teacher had to find the key, had to go out into the hallway, put the key into a lock, engage the lock, and then go back into the classroom. Under stress, when there's flashing lights, screaming, yelling, gunfire, smoke, fire alarms going off, things like that happening, the first thing you're going to lose are your fine motor skills. So think about locks where you can simply flip a latch or slide a lock up or down or push a button, because those you do not need those fine motor skills for. This is a picture actually from Jocelyn in my office. And so I accused her of trying to lock me out, but she says that she received a call from a woman who was actually kind of upset, and she was worried because she had a similar setup in her office space and didn't know how to secure the door because there wasn't a lock on it. And so we just demonstrated, Jocelyn demonstrated this for her, took a chair, flipped it over onto the back, and it was a perfect size where it filled that space and that door did not move. And if you see that sweatshirt hanging on that door, there's actually glass underneath because you want to cut off visual and physical access.
Yeah, this took less than 10 seconds.
Door closers, the mechanisms that are located at the top of some doors to assist in opening and closing. If you can take that out of the picture, if you can render that useless, the door does not operate. So during your mental scripting, while you're practicing barricading and while you're looking at different ways to do that, this is something that definitely can work. It does take practice and training. A belt, a cord, a piece of clothing, if you can tie that mechanism in a way that it does not operate, then that door does not open. The other picture that you see there is from pieces of a fire hose that a woman, she sent us this picture. Their fire department was changing over equipment. Cut it into sections and it acted as a sleeve over that mechanism. If you have the ability in your workspace or wherever else that you are to set up your area the way that you want it, we recommend putting heavier items such as file cabinets or other types of cabinets or any heavy object closer to the door. In the event that you have to barricade, it's much easier to move it 5 or 10 feet as opposed to 20 feet or more. 2 things we want you to remember: cover versus concealment. So when we're talking about hiding, barricading, and things like that, cover means protection. So maybe within your space in that building, there is a room or a place where that door is more secure. For example, IT closets. A lot of times in businesses will have steel doors instead of wood doors, something like that. That will slow down or stop a round from a firearm. So that provides you some level of protection. Concealment means simply hiding. A lot of people feel like that if they can't get behind a closed door or something like that to barricade, that they're just gonna be killed. That is not true. There are examples after examples of where people simply hid and they were able to survive those incidents because that person did not see them. You have to remember, I am working against the clock. If I'm the perpetrator, I have to move quickly. I am not going to go in a room and search through every cabinet or closet or other things that might be in there looking for people because I don't have time. You want to be that kid. When I was little and I played hide and seek, there was always one kid that you could never find, no matter where you were. That is the person you want to be.
We did drills 2 summers ago with some teachers, and I was acting as the assailant. I went into a classroom, the lights were off. I looked, I did not see one person in there. Drill ended and about 22 teachers walked out of that classroom. They were concealed so well, I did not see them. In Module 1, we talked about mental scripting, knowing if this happens, then that. What do I do? So I challenge you with the mental scripting. I want you to also think in your workplace, where is the closest first aid equipment? Where would I go if I'm in this area and I need an AED or a defibrillator? Also, what items are in your first aid equipment? We have done Stop the Bleed training at businesses, and I asked them if someone was injured here and you had to help with bleeding control, what would you use? And they said, well, the equipment in our first aid box. And it was about 4 batteries and a couple napkins. There was not equipment in there that would help them to slow down that bleed. So you see here on the screen, these are different training equipment, different go bags that we've seen across the county. They have tourniquets, they have gauze. They're basically titled trauma kits. So again, we talked about this in Module 1. If you can attend a Stop the Bleed training, it's a wonderful course, a wonderful way to have techniques to slow down the bleed. We're going to show you now a couple hands-on. Cindy's going to demonstrate direct pressure on a wound, showing you how to put that pressure. We're now going to show you, and again, in the event you have maybe clothing, t-shirt, sweatshirt, gauze. This represents what packing a wound looks like, and you're trying to slow down that bleed or stop it so that someone doesn't die. And the last thing that we're going to demonstrate is putting on a tourniquet. I mentioned this in Module 1. Law enforcement, we all carry tourniquets now. I carry several, knowing if I run into an incident like this, any kind of mass casualty incident, I'm going to throw them to people hoping they can help.
I also just want to make sure that you understand this does not take the place of actual stop the bleed training. This is for demonstration purposes only. So I don't want people feeling like after you watch that you are all trained up. We just want to kind of demonstrate what it is that we do during that.
Yeah, and this is all new. A lot of businesses, the thought of having tourniquets and trauma kits in their first aid kits, it's a lot to take in, but we know from incidents that have taken place how important it is to have this.
So the fight. As I said before, you have to have options, you have to be flexible. This is not a linear process. In other words, you don't have to start with run, you don't have to then go to hide and then end up at fight. You might be faced with the fight portion of this from the very start. But this is a last resort only option. We do not want people trying to take on these perpetrators by themselves in order, to keep them from continuing doing what they're doing. Some folks say, I'm built that way, I'm going to move towards that individual. That is a personal choice. But remember, this is a last resort option. What does the fight mean? Basically, what that means is you are doing something to interrupt what we refer to as the OODA loop. What that means for you, it's an acronym, but what it means for you is you're breaking their concentration, you're interrupting their train of thought so that you're putting sort of a wrench into their plan. You're going to throw them off for a moment. So the first thing that you want to do is figure out, is there something that I can access, I can pick up, and I can throw at this individual? Because you want to interrupt their visual field. You want to disturb that. So you're throwing anything and everything you can at the same time. So this is happening together at the same time. You want to introduce noise. Banging, yelling, screaming, whatever it is that you can do as loud as you can do it. Our brains work how our brains work. So what that means is that when you flood the brain with stimulus all at once, it has this effect where it overwhelms. That buys you a moment of opportunity, but it does not last forever. I also want you moving in that type of scenario. I don't want you standing still. Moving target's harder to hit than a stationary target. So then at that point, you have to figure out and decide for yourself, what did my mental scripting prepare me for? Do you have now plan B or plan C after you do those things? What you do might very well look like this with this video.
As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what.
Strength in numbers. It's an old saying, it's kind of corny, but it is absolutely true. You need to understand that a perpetrator oftentimes does not have a lot of training experience with a firearm. Case in point, at Pulse nightclub, that individual, once that event was over, powers that be got a hold of the cell phone and they looked to see what was this individual looking up, what were they researching, what were they doing before this event started. And what they found out for him was that he spent a fair amount of time during that incident Googling how to clear a malfunction. So oftentimes they don't have a lot of that training experience, and they also are not very accurate when they are firing. If you add stress to that, it decreases the accuracy that much more. So yes, somebody could still get shot. Yes, somebody is still going to probably lose their life at some point through there. But if you can act together as one, we call it a pack mentality, everybody going towards that individual all at once and swarming them, that can absolutely end that right there. So we have just a little short piece of security footage. This was from a college. This was a few years ago, but it kind of demonstrates what we're talking about. So you'll see this individual come in those doors. They have a long gun in their hand. That individual had already shot and killed some folks on campus, went into this particular building. You will see a person coming out from the right. That is the person that was working at a front desk at that moment. About 22 years old, student at the college. And because of his situational awareness, and I'm sure hopefully did some mental scripting, you will be able to see what his actions were.
I'm going to leave you with 9/11/2001, the passengers and the crew of Flight 93. When they saw what was occurring on that plane that day, they knew what was going to happen and it wasn't going to end well. And they said, let's roll, and they took that plane down.
So this ends our module number 2. The next module, module number 3, we will be talking about post-incident. What happens after that first 8 minutes? What are considerations? What are things that happen? What are things that you can do to take care of yourself?
Thank you for joining us, and we hope that this was helpful. Stay safe.
This is your Dane County Sheriff Calvin Barrett, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to wrap up this training and thank you so much for your time and effort as you went through this training. The purpose of this training was to educate and empower you on what to do before an active assailant event, during an active assailant event, and after an active assailant event. And the fact that you took time out of your day to educate yourself on this is the key to us maintaining a safe community here in Dane County, but also for all Dane County employees. Thank you again for your time, and know that there are additional resources for you after an active assailant event that can allow you to help heal and move forward. Remember that safety in our Dane County building and in Dane County as a whole is all of our responsibilities, and we can't do it without you. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.